Oh boy, oh boy, people are here. Okay, now I'm gonna go to, all right. Oh, so every time I go to YouTube, they change everything. So I did what I could do with the directions they gave me, and I had a link and sent that out way in advance, and then started my stream. And anyway, on my end, it looked like it was going, and everything was streaming fine, and it's still recording. Yes, so I don't know what happened. So I changed a link, and of course, how the heck are you going to know that I changed a link, because it just kept saying waiting for Guy. Well, I've been here. So anyway, we sent a new link. I tried to post it on my website, ran away from here to a different computer, and anyway, so hopefully you're all here. I was going to say, I'm using a streaming device, so I can't see any of the chats. So Susan and Vicky are going to be watching the chats and everything, letting me know if there was a problem, because we were having a big problem. So anyway, what I want to say is, I want to say thank you for being here. I'm so grateful that you hung in there and that you're here. So anyway, who knew at the beginning of the year that we were going to be having this COVID-19? And I'm going to say this again because I have been saying this, but nobody was hearing me. So I was listening to my intuition at the beginning of the year. And what I did was, in my Friday class, which I go to a senior center, I started filming everything. And then I would get back to my shop after class was done, and I would upload all of those demos that I did and upload them to YouTube, unlisted, and I would mail those off. Well, I would put them in my website and then on a private page, and send a link to my students so they were watching it. So Susan was kind of impressed with that. And then all of the workshops, all the demos were being canceled right and left because of the social distancing. And so David Smith was going live and going to do the workshop. So Susan asked me if I would do it. And I said, of course I'll do it, not knowing what was involved at all. So anyway, David helped me out immensely because my cameras work, but the Mac that I use was not finding them at all. So I needed to get some hardware actually, and plug that into the computer so that all my cameras could be recording and everything. So I wanted to say big thanks to Susan, to David Smith for helping me out, and also to Randy Sahai, who is my old boss, who let me use some of her equipment in the meantime. So, and I'm very grateful for you all. So what we're going to be doing is working. I might as well switch to the overhead camera. And what we're going to be doing is working on something. And we're going to be working on this. I know it's hard to see, but it's a photo of an oak tree that was at Hakone. So somebody had asked me, what is a Hakone oak? Well, it's not a type of oak. It was an oak that happened it was an oak tree that was at Hakone. So Hakone Gardens is a Japanese garden in Saratoga, and it's on a hill, and so because it's such a big hill, in the morning you can't see anything because the light hasn't hit. So I went around taking pictures of other things, and I really like this. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be showing how to paint the Hakone oak. So here was kind of the photo reference, and I painted a couple of different versions. Here's one version, so it's very loose, and then I went ahead and I painted another version, and this one was even looser, and I just wanted to have the feeling of light. and moodiness and everything, and I love them. This is a lot more refined, a lot of ramification in the branches, and this one is a little bit more suggestive, more impressionistic, and the colors I think are a lot of fun. So that's what I'm going to do the demo on, and then I'm going to go over a little bit of information about the workshop. So one of the first things that I want to do is we're going to be working with masking fluid, but we're going to be working with masking fluid on wet and dry paper. So I wanted to set that up, and what I'm going to do is do a quick little demo. And this is going to be dry paper, this is going to be damp paper, this is going to be wet paper, and this is going to be saturated paper. And what I'm going to do is put some masking so you can, we're doing a little test to see how that changes everything. So I remember not too long ago I was talking with one of my students that I was going to be doing this, and she said, "You're going to put masking on wet paper?" And I thought, oh God. So yes, I am. And she thought that that was a big no-no. But so what I'm doing is I'm mixing up a little bit of color in here because you're not going to be able to see it's just white on white, so I'm trying to get some pigment in here. Ooh, immediately clean that brush. There we go. So there's a little bit of blue to this, so it won't just be white on white. And what I'm going to do, like I said, is work on wet paper, on damp paper, and dry paper. So that's dry, this is damp. So I'm just going to get this damp. This is going to be wet, and this is going to be totally saturated. And because it's all white on white, you can't see a darn thing. That's why I put a little bit of color in the masking fluid. So this is on dry paper, which you can kind of see. It just hangs there, nice little dots. This is on damp paper, and I don't know if you can see, but it's, let me zoom in. As soon as I put it down, it kind of disperses. And this is wet paper. Let me get this, re-wet that. And this is on wet paper, and it really disperses. And this is saturated paper. And as I put that down, it really moves. So what I'm going to do is not wait for this to dry. You've been waiting long enough. So, but what I am going to do is I created one of these already for you. So I'm going to put that aside, put this here, and get some purple. And paint over this. So this is all dry now. And what I'm going to do is paint over it. And the key to this is, well, this is the key. You'll be seeing what happens. So this was on dry paper, so you can see they just hung out. This was on damp paper, and those spread out a little bit. This was on wet paper, and it really spread out, and this was on saturated paper. So it looks kind of cool, But what does it look like when you take the masking off? So I had done one for you guys yesterday, and so this is what it looks like when we remove the masking on dry paper, which is what you kind of expected. This is what it looks like when you remove it from the damp paper, and it's really cool. It has a soft, feathery edge, and this is on wet paper. And this is on saturated paper. And so you can see all the differences. Dry paper, it just hangs right where you put it. On damp paper, it feathers out a little bit and gives you that wonderful soft edge. On wet paper, it also gives a nice soft edge, but you don't have much control. And on saturated paper, that masking flows everywhere, and so it's hard to have the pigment to reach the paper, and we don't want that. So this is a big key to working with masking on wet, saturated, damp, or dry paper. Okay, so I'm going to get started on a demo. And what I'm going to do is get this damp. This is the tree. And what I've done is, this is the first board to explain things, so I don't have it taped down. But on the other pages that I've worked on, it is taped down to a board because we're going to be working wet on wet. And that paper, oh, and let me go that way. And by getting it damp, I'm going to have some of those dots spread out a little bit. So this is with the colored masking. As I move forward, I'm going to be using white masking. And these are softening out. And this is going to be resisting all the pigment. When this is dry, totally dry, what I'm going to do is add a few sprinkles of more masking, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm not going to show that because I'm not waiting for this to dry. I've got a board ready. And here it is. So it's hard to see, but what I'm going to do is I am going to start working by adding some color. And we're going to be working wet on wet. Oops. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a little more yellow to this because I don't have enough. I always want to make sure I have enough pigment so that I don't have to stop midstream because we're working. I want to be prepared. I want to be like a Boy Scout. I want to be ready. So I've got my yellow mixed in here all ready for me. And what I'm going to do is get my paper wet. Now when I first start off, I get the paper wet and I want to have like a glass surface. And what I'm doing is getting the whole thing wet. Oh, and you can see that this is taped to a gator board. And the reason why I do that, I was going to try doing it without, but the paper, when it gets all wet, it gets all really floppy. And we need to manipulate this, and it's hard to do that if it's all floppy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put some yellow in here. And my objective is to have a light area up at the top here. So I'm going to let this move down and spread, and you can see where the masking is. So I have to kind of go around all those little bits of masking. Reminds me of a kid when we used to get the Cracker Jacks, and the prize would be a little clown with ball bearings inside, and you had to get those ball bearings into the holes, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just spritzing this with water to help it move. So watch. See how that's moving now? So what I'm going to do is let this move down. And I'm letting it move. What I'm doing is, instead of painting, I am tilting. I'm using gravity. And I'm just going to get this all painted in. I'll go ahead and help it where it's already dry. Just to add a little bit there. I'm going to tilt it the other way, and what happens is this is going to help to re-wet the paper, and then I can always spritz if I don't have enough. Okay, and then I let it run down, and I'm happy with that. So my objective was to get some color in here and to have it really soft, a nice soft edge in here. And so what I'm going to do is wipe off all of this excess. And I'm using a tissue. And what I can do is, if I want it deeper up here, I can move this and manipulate it and have it go up and back and around, but I'm pretty happy with this. It looks so bright now, but this is working wet and wet. So what happens is the pigment dissipates in the water. And when this is a little damp versus being really wet, what I'll do is I'll put some masking on here. But we're not going to wait for that. So what I'm going to do is go to the next board. And I'm going to wick up some of this excess here and put this aside and go to the next board. So here's what it looks like. I'll be right back. There's what it looks like wet, and this is what it looks like dry. I'm going to see if I can back up a little bit more. There we go. So wet and dry. I put some more masking down and now I'm ready to add my next color. And my next color is going to be bright rose. It's a color by Holbein, and I love it. And I'm going to make sure that I've got enough. Boy, I had some color in here, and it's so warm that it's just kind of dried up. So what I'm going to do is mix this up, and I want to be sure that my color and pigment is not so thin and not too creamy. So it's got to be just right. So we got to Goldilocks it. So I want it, because as we're working wet on wet, what happens is the color dissipates. It thins out because you're putting it on wet paper and it just moves. But that's how you get that wonderful, gorgeous, soft transition. So instead of me painting and getting it wet, what happens is if I start wetting it with a brush, all the color starts moving. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to spritz this with water. Have a nice glass surface there. And now what I can do is just lightly make sure that it grabs in. It's super, super saturated. So I'm going to lift up some of the paper here. And this is the first go at it with this wonderful, wonderful color, which I just love, bright rose. And so I'm going to go ahead and put that bright rose in. Isn't it gorgeous? And I'm going to let this move down because I want it to hang here, but I want it to move down. At the same time. So I'm manipulating it just by tilting it. It's going where I don't want it up there. I'm not so concerned. What I'm going to do is just get my spritzer. Well, first I'll get some tissues. Put some color in. Don't want to paint too much. Tilt this, let it move easily. So all that pigment is dispersing in the water, which is really cool. You have to be patient and you can't go too fast. So there's a lot of color here, so I want it to move down. So I don't know if you can see the threads moving down. That's all the color. Now I'm going to let this color move that way, and this is going to be filling in, and I'll let it come down. So I'm tilting it so the color moves down this way. And now I'm going to let it run in. And what I'm after is, this is my objective. I want it nice and light in here. And you can see the thread. So as it's going around the masking dots, we need to make it sure that they go all the way around. So instead of just having strings, I'm letting them come down, then I'm letting them go around it. And now I've got a nice, soft, and pretty pink. And look at how soft it is all up in here. So what I'm going to do is, if instead of waiting for this to dry a little bit more, you people have waited, sorry about that, long enough. So what I'm going to do is, I've got another board. There's a beautiful sheen on here. What I love about this color, I'm going to pull it up instead of, I don't know if you could see all the grain in here, but it's just gorgeous and it's so bright. Now, if I wanted to, I can still let this move and soften while it's still damp. So I'm letting it move and letting it encroach into this area here. I don't know if you can see. So it's just because I whipped up a lot of that excess water, but it's still wet enough on the board that I can still play with it. And it's a lot softer now, okay? So what I would do is I would wait for this to be a little bit more dry, and then I would flick a few more drops of masking on here. So we've got some white masked off, we have some yellow masked off, and when this is drier, I'll do more, and we'll have some pink little sprinkles of dots. Okay, so I'm gonna put this aside. Oh, let me, so this is wet. And this is dry. So wet oh no, wet, dry. So it's not enough color, so I need to punch this up. This was the first pass, so I'm going to punch this up. I want more color. So I'll be right back. I'm going to get rid of this wet board. All right. So I'm going to do the same thing. Yes, and I did put masking on here, so there's little areas where I've saved some pink. You can see the white, you can see the yellow. You can't see the pink because the masking is kind of transparent. But what I'm going to do is do the same thing. I'm going to spritz this puppy down. And now, I don't know if you can tell, but from the light, but I can see where the pink masking is. It's really kind of hard to see. I'm going to let the water move down. I am going to wick up excess off of the tape, let it run down onto the towel. That's why I have a towel here. It's funny because I have brown paper here protecting my tabletop, and I went and cleaned it, or not cleaned it, I got rid of it and put a new one down, but you're not seeing it anyway. So anyway, that's just me, kind of funny. So what I want is, I want this to be a little bit more punchy, because we were working wet on wet. The colors dissipated a lot. And so I want more color here. And so what I'm going to do is get this wet so that it really moves. And I've got more color up in here. So, and I'm happy with that. And all I have to do is tilt this back down and it leaves. It goes on its merry way. And as it's doing that, it's re-wetting this paper. Okay, so I'm much happier. It's a brighter yellow. And now we have some oranges in here, kind of like a sunrise or a sunset. And now what I'm going to do is add more of that bright rose. I love this color. So I'm just going to put some in here. I'm just lightly putting it down. Gonna let that run down the paper. This is, to me, is so much fun. I'm a nut with how the pigment runs and the strings and everything. I love it. So I'm letting it work out. Let's let it encroach back in, up in here. I don't know if you can see how rosy it is here, and then it's a fiery orange up there. I'm going to let this move down, but I'm going to wick up some of this excess. Let it run back. Tilt. Want this all to be filled up. And if it's not, what I'm going to do, I'm going to tilt the board up. Ooh, I just smacked it. But I have to keep an eye on this area here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let some of this pink run down, because I need more in there. And instead of painting, but I have to keep an eye on what's happening over in here, because this is the most important part. So I'm letting it run this way. Letting it fill in. If I go slow enough, which is hard because there's so much water and pigment here, and I don't want it to be traveling too much up here, but I do want this filled in, but there's so much excess as I twist and turn and tilt, things are changing so, but it's a lot brighter. And look at, it's really, I don't know if you can see, it's real pale here, then it's yellow, then it's orange, and then it's more pink over here, and I'm just slowly letting this fill in. All of this is filling in. Okay? So this is wet, and it's so different than where we left off from the first board. And so we're gonna let this dry. What I want to do is I want to take a little break. I have to get this dry. I painted so much yesterday that I didn't leave an orange and pretty purple board, I mean a yellow and pink for myself. I went ahead. So I'm gonna hit this with a dryer, let this dry a little bit more. Actually, I'm just gonna let it tilt and move around. And I'm so sorry that you guys had to wait, and here I was live on a different link. So I don't know what happened. I'm gonna have to figure that one out. What the heck happened there? Like I said though, they keep changing their application. So as you get used to something, all of a sudden they change the whole thing. It looks different, and you're trying to figure out what you need to do. At least we're streaming. And the other thing is I will have a copy of this. So if you missed anything, I'll be able to go ahead and post that. Let's see here. So I'm going to be back. I'm going to hit this with a dryer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some masking on here and then dry it. But I have to wait for this to be just a little bit more dry than it is right now. But do you see how just moving this about gently, it kind of fills everything in. And what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be working with another color, which is purple. I love it. It's kind of heavy here, but I'm going to let this dry. So I'll be back. What I'm going to do is I'm going to mute this so I can dry it, and I'll be back. All right, so this is damp, and what I'm going to do, because I need to save some of these colors, is I'm going to hit this, and you can see where it's damp, it's spreading out a little bit. I love this color over here. This reminds me of when I was a kid, and we used to get the ice cream that was called a missile, and it had all these tropical, I was going to say flavors, colors, but anyway. So now I have to wait for this to dry, and I'll show you, I know what, I'll show you where we're going to go. How about that? So while I'm waiting for this to dry, I'm going to show you where we're going to go. This is where we're headed. So I'm going to hit this with a dryer, and I'll be right back. That didn't take long. And I'm not letting you hear the dryer. All right. It's still a little wet, but it's wet on the inside and it's kind of dry on the outside. In the meantime, what I'm going to do, giving it a little bit more time to dry, is I was talking about Goldilocksing it, having the colors just right. And what I'm going to do is kind of show that. So, move that aside. Ay, caramba. Because we're working wet on wet, and that color just moves on it, I want it to be kind of creamy. So that's really wet. I need it a little bit creamier. And let's give an example of the bright rose. So the bright rose was okay because I wanted that to disperse out, but the purple I really want to hang in there. So I'm going to get a little more purple in here, and you'll see why. I'll show you. So I'm putting some more purple in. I love using a pipette. Instead of putting a brush in there, it keeps my water cleaner. I have more control. And now I'm going to work that around so I'm getting it evenly distributed and mushing that pigment in with the color. This is such a vibrant color. It's so deep and dark when it's wet, but then it dries kind of lighter, but it's darker than some of the other violets I've tried. So I love this one. It's Windsor Violet, or dioxazine. I love saying that because I can. And this is, so let's see. So I don't know if you can tell, it's a little bit heavier now. So I want to get this, oh, I wish that was a little drier, but that's okay. This isn't real life. Well, it is, but. Okay, so I'm going to get this wet again. I'm going to take off that excess. This is a real fast lesson, oh my God. And we're just repeating the same thing over and over. And my Friday class is doing this, but we're working on half sheets of watercolor paper, which are really a lot of fun because it's bigger. So you have a little bit more playtime and more area that you have to kind of get to. It's a little dry right in here. So just with a damp, clean brush, gonna let this paper work itself again. And what I'm gonna do is, I want this darker, but I also want it really vibrant. And it's kind of light here, so I'm just lightly, and I have to be careful because that masking was wet on the inside. But you can see where I've put some of the pink masking in. You can kind of see it now. Okay, put that aside. It's so darn wet. So I'm going to wick up some of that excess. I love working wet on wet. A lot of people have a problem with it, but what I do is I just kind of work with it. I'm not forcing it. I'm finding out what the actions are. So if I need it to move, I'll tilt it. If it's too wet or too dark, I'll let it run just by tilting the paper. I'm using gravity. Okay, I want some of this to move in here. So I don't know if you can see, there's strings of this bright rose moving down. I'm gonna let it run this way. Oops, and it starts wanting to run there. Gonna let it run that way. And I can see that it's loading up. What I'm going to do is wick away some excess from the side here. Same thing over here. Now you can see the strings moving down. I want them to, and which was good because we re-wet this by letting the gravity pull everything down. So now there's a lot of color moving down and it's re-wetting down here, which is good. Here we go. So see, it's all wet. I need this wet because I'm going to tilt it back, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put that purple on. And I'm just laying it in, oops, and letting it go. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside. It's moving too far up here. I'm going to let it travel down. It's going to want to travel up. So I'm going to wick up some of this excess. Let it move down. Boy, it really traveled here. So, what are you going to do? What I'm going to do is I'm going to put more over here and let that run. There, that's better. A little more even. I'm going to let it go this way. Oh, look at the colors in there. I love how they are softening out. Let's let this move down here. So I'm having it go down and this way. So when I tilt it back down, and I don't want it over here, we've got enough. I want that filled in. So I'm trying to fill this in, letting the colors do their thing. So it's softening up in here. Guy, just put some color here. Oh, and the other thing, I spend so much time alone. Well, I guess we all do, but I really am alone. I'm single. And so what happens is, I just talk to myself, but I've been much nicer to myself lately. It's a conscious choice too. I'm going to wick up some of the excess, and I'm going to let this move about and fill in. Oh, let's let that move in because we've got a big gap here. I kind of like this. Let's let it move that way so it'll fill in here and it'll fill in that way. Now that that is filled in, but I don't want it coming down here. I want that filled in. So I'm going to let this travel. And just being, and now that all that purple moved in, do you see how it's encroaching over here? Getting rid of that hot spot. So now I can let it come back. Whoops. So you can see the pink that I saved also. I like this, so it's wavy. It's not just a straight U, and it's more natural. Okay, so this is wet. very vibrant. Thank you guys for putting up with me. I did all these boards yesterday, and I kept making sure as I painted one to save one, but I forgot to save the one that we did prior to this. So that's why I had to wait for it to be dry. So I'm going to put this aside and show you what we're going to do next. Well, you did see what we're going to do next. It's right here. So this is wet, this is dry. Look at how soft all of this is. It's just incredible. Okay, I'll be right back. So in this case, what I want to do is I want to get rid of some of these because they're so white before I do another layer of color, and then we could get started on the tree. So some of these are just too darn bright. I love them, but I want this to be a little bit more natural looking. So I can get rid of some of the yellow there. Just here and there. Otherwise it'll start looking too Disney. Nothing against Disney, but okay, so I'm going to do the same thing. I think I need a little bit more yellow up here, so I've got plenty of yellow. Well, not plenty, but and then I can start working on the tree. I don't need that much. And do I have enough of the pink? No. I love this Hakone oak. I'm going to show you what we've done in the Friday class with the half sheet boards, which are pretty awesome. It's what do I want to say? It's the larger they are, the more play you have on the paper. This is so tiny, but I did this tiny so we could see it easily. I didn't want to, as I work a half sheet board, you're not seeing everything as I move about. Okay, so this is good. So I want it a little creamier because I want it to hang. Okay, this is the last pass with these colors. I'm going, oh my God, these poor people. All right, so getting this wet, and we've saved white, yellow, pink, purple. The last board that I did when it was wet, you know, I had to wait for that to dry before I could put purple in, but I've already done that. So just making sure the paper is good and wet, and it is. I can see where, there we go. Now watch, just with the water, do you see that purple moving? Whew. So if I used a brush to get this wet, it just moves everything. It leaves these harsh lines where we wanted to have all of this wonderful, you know, softness from the yellow to the oranges, from the oranges to the reds, from the reds to the purples. And it's dry right there. Can I get that wet? Look at that purple move. Heck. Right here. And right there. There we go. Okay, I'm going to wick up some of this excess. I want to ensure that this is all wet. Okay. I'm going to put some more yellow here. So now I'm working with 3 colors all at once. It's just building up the colors. I'm going to do that with the bright orange. Now this purple is dark, or it seemed really faint and light, but it's really charged. Okay, I'm going to let this run down first. I'm going to wick up some of this excess. I've been having trouble getting Kleenex. You can see how much I go through. Look at that bright rose. Love it. Actually, I like it a lot. My other examples, oh, I love it. But right here, it's a little bright. See how I just, with a little spritz of water, push that away. I'm actually liking this better than where I was going to go. So I'm going to let this dry. Instead of adding more purple to the bottom, I think this is really gorgeous. I know, I'm a nut. I'll admit it. Ooh, look at that. Ooh, I like it. Okay, so I'm going to let this dry. And I'm going to go to the next board. I like this. Look at all the different colors in here. I don't want to lay this flat, because if I do, this is so wet, the paper's going to mound up here. And there are those little mountains and valleys, and all of the color will pool, P-O-O-L, in those little valleys. And it's kind of obnoxious if that's not how you wanted it. And it also can create some blossoms. So what I'm going to do, oh my God, this is so pretty. I'm going to let this run back so it'll soften out some of this stuff. And if it doesn't, we're just going to add branches. So I can see the threads coming back. It's so pretty in here. It's so deep and warm, and then so bright and pink, and then really cool with the purple. Okay, so I'm going to let those strings, because the water and the pigment were going around, not going around the, what do you call it, masking. So it's causing these little rivulets. Okay, so this is dry enough. I'm going to let this tilt super, super vertical. And look at, nothing's coming back down here. So I can let this dry at an angle. I'm going to, I love this. This is what this is wet, this is dry. Do you see how ghosty it is in here? It's almost like the northern lights, but it's morning. Or, if you look at it this way, it could be evening. But anyway, I love this one. Okay, so I'm going to put this aside. I'm going to start working on this. All right, so at this point we're done working wet on wet. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start filling in the tree. And the first thing we're going to do is I'm going to start with permanent rose, because to me it's like the sun is coming through and it's hitting branches or blossoms, who knows, whatever you want. And what's happening is I want to have a red, I want the tree set up in red. We could get it darker, but I just want it set up. And now what I'm going to do is just fill in those places. So here's a branch, and this is pretty thin. Here's another branch. And what I want to do is also is it's like creating a glow. Not gonna play too much. Whoops. So what I love are these brushes that I'm using right now are low Cornell brushes, and I'm working on 300-pound paper by Arches, which I love because it's tough enough for me. And I tried other papers, and like Fabriano Uno, I loved it until I went to take masking off and something happened. Ooh, what's going on here? I missed a pencil line. And I tried using Saunders, but when you're doing wet on wet like this, as we're tilting and letting the color run, it didn't want to run far, even if the paper was wet. So, I was not happy with that. And then, but I love these brushes. They have a gorgeous, and they're so inexpensive. It's, what do you call it? A synthetic brush, and they're easy to clean. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but I have one for yellow, I have one for purple, I have one for red. So I don't have to stop and clean. I can just keep painting. Now you're going to say, as I am painting here, I am going over, there's some masking that's obscured part of the trunk. But in nature, as we're looking at this, nature, what do I want to say? There's blossoms, for crying out loud. And so as the sun is hitting it, it's obscuring the trunk and the branches of the tree. And some of them we're going to keep, some of them we're going to get rid of. But let's go back to the brushes. So I love these brushes. They're inexpensive. You used to be able to get them, the first time that I got them, I was doing an art expo in Houston, Texas, and they had the brush guy, not the brush guys, maybe it was the brush guys, and they were dealing with low Cornell, and that's what these are. It's also on my list if you're taking the workshop. So I love these brushes. They're inexpensive. They have a gorgeous, gorgeous point, and they clean easily. All you have to do is just plunk it in water and hit the bottom of your bucket, and the color releases. And they're so inexpensive. Instead of waiting, I like to paint immediately, respond to what's happening on the paper at the time. I don't have time to clean a brush. You have to respond immediately. So if I've got those brushes ready for me, no big whoop. And the other thing is, I love these brushes too, and this is Princeton Art and Brush Company. I don't know if you can see it, but this is on my list also. And this is an angled flat wash brush, and it's series 4050. And I love having a pipette because that just helps me keep my water here cleaner instead of spritzing and things like that. I love using this incredible white mask. It's on the list. It also says back here in big caps, stir, do not shake. So you don't want to be shaking your masking fluid, especially if you're putting it in a different container, like some applicators where you can do fine lines and all that. If you shake it, when you are trying to get a nice fine line, you're going to get a lot of bubbles. So, and then I always have a little, like this was a little salt well somebody made in ceramics class, and I bought it. It was perfect to put masking in, but I'm not using this masking because I got phthalo blue in it. Or you could use a shot glass. Also I've got some other brushes, and I've got, this is a brush we'll be using in the workshop, which is a 1/2 inch connoisseur Taklon scrubber, And so it's got a chisel edge and it's really fine, so if we need to get in there, but we don't have to do that so much for this, well, we'll see. And this is a Fritz scrubber, and this is softer and it's more like a filbert, so it's rounded at the corners. And this is just Winsor Newton Regency Gold, a number 2, and it's a flat brush. And sometimes I like to just wiggle a brush just to clean something up, and we may be doing that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I kind of want this tree to be dark because this lavender or this purple is so darn dark. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and start adding some purple to that. And I'm going to be, since we're done with adding colors, I'm going to be a little bit more bold. I'm going to get a lavendery color here with a little bit of perm rose so that I've got a nice mix. And I don't know if you can see. Oh yeah, you can see. So this is a palette that I love. It's they call it a bulletproof. It's by Mayello, and I'll put that on my list also. But now what I want to do is I want to get some of this darker, and I want to have some of that red showing, and this is bark texture, so we don't have to be perfect. So I don't want everything filled in. This is bark, for crying out loud. And it's a tree, and it's, you know, not realism. Well, it's subjective, but, I mean, not subjective, representational, but you don't have to be perfectly working to get it just so, and some of us are really tight like that. And I could be very tight, but I love the opportunity to just let go and be kind of free and loose at the same time. So it's how we're going to get there. And what I'm going to do is if you can see, I'm just floating this in, not hitting everything, and kind of like making intersections. So if there's an intersection there, that will be darker. There's some masking in here that's obscuring, like I said, and I just keep going. Down in here, this is the area where I get scared, because this is where you have to start making things up. I shouldn't say scared, but you know, if I was alone by myself, I would be very bold, but people are watching. Oh my God. So, but anyway, we'll see. So the tree is starting to appear, the Hakone oak. I thought it was funny, somebody saying, I've never heard of a Hakone oak. You know, there's the valley oaks, the California coastal live oak, the cork oak, which I love, and all different kinds, but I've never heard of a Hakone oak. It just happened to be the garden that I was in at the time. And I was so disappointed because I got there thinking, oh, the wisteria are blooming, but unfortunately everything was in shade, like I said. Ooh, what's going on here? And so I just had to go along, sometimes you just have to find your joy or find your happiness. So I was there. You have to make do with what you got. So might as well look for something instead of just being disappointed all the time. So loved the picture, and I've painted this a few times, and I know my Friday class is having a ball with it. This is where we're at in the Friday class. So this was the third, we just finished the third week, and I just started painting the branches. Let's get that a little more red. So we're starting to see the tree. It's hanging in there. And I'm going to give this just a second before I move on. And what I'm going to do is show you what we've been doing in the Friday class. So, look at all the boards that I did for this. And I forgot to leave one before, that when it was just the pink and the yellow, for crying out loud. But anyway, I've used this background in so many different things also. So, what was I going to do? Oh yeah, show you what we've done in the Friday class. So these are ones that I showed everybody before we started the Friday class. So this was kind of a reddish tree. Never finished it. It was just trying different colors. This is kind of like outer space. So it started with the yellow, and look at these big ass drops in here. And I had used a ruling pen with masking fluid and put some branches in here. So you'll see where the color is kind of locked in here because the masking creates these dams. And I love it. It's like the Big Bang. But this is what we've done in Friday. So while we're waiting for things to dry, I work on another one. So I give it a chance to dry so we're not so anxious. So this is, but look at how moody this is. So the colors mingle around. There's a wonderful softness in here, and it's like dappled light and everything. And this was another one. So these are the same colors I used for this, but look at how different it is when you have a large space to work in. It just disperses, and so when this tree comes in, it's going to filter all the way down there. But and you can see the graininess of that wonderful bright rose. This was a blue one. So the very first time that I did this for the Friday class, we went live. So I was practicing for this, believe it or not. And what happened was my internet service went out. So we had to start the class with Zoom, and that was annoying as heck. I'm trying to teach and letting people in at the same time. Oh, it was horrible. Then when the internet came back up, we went onto live and YouTube Live, and we went on from there. So I created one from the beginning because not everybody was able to see it. And this was the one. And so there were big white masking splotches here. So I don't know if you could see that. And right in here, there was a really big one, and right here. So what I did was I removed it and then put the blue over, and it kind of encroached over it, so it softened it out. And this is my favorite, one of my favorites. So it's got French ultramarine blue. There's green going in here, so it's really grainy and granulated, and there's yellows and greens, and they mingle in here, so it's just a very amorphous background, and I can hardly wait to take the masking off of that. And so let me get back to the tree because that had enough time to dry up, and then we could talk about the workshop, what we're going to be doing, and I can show you a little bit. So what I'm going to do, let's get that purple in here. And why am I working with such a teensy brush? So some of these things, I just want bark texture. And just going to go for it. But I kind of like having a little bit of a halo. Oh, and one other thing. So first, let's just get our darks in. This board is still a little bit damp. And I'm putting my arm on it. And look at, I'm just going to town, having a ball. So I kind of want to have a light halo around it. The sun is hitting this, for crying out loud. And I can make be a little bit more sharper as I move on. But if I just lightly and loosely fill some of this stuff in, I don't have to be so perfect right now. I could attend to that later. If I am trying to be too perfect when I'm first starting off, I get really tight. And if I make a mistake, then I'm kind of having to hang there and fix it. And I don't like that. I like moving around. And if I do make a mistake, I have to ignore it. Have to. And that's hard for some people. Sometimes that's all you're going to see, and it stops you from moving forward because you're upset with what you think is a mistake. And I'd rather incorporate the mistakes into the painting. It's more fun to paint that way, and I trust in the process, and I trust that things will work. If I keep hung up on a mistake, I can't see anything else, and I want to see everything. And what I also do is, if I have made a mistake, what I'll do, like right there, ay caramba. So what I'll do is I'll give it a distance. I'll step away from it, ignore it, try to, and a solution might come to me. Okay, so now that that's kind of basically filled in, where's my little brush? Where'd my little number 6 go? Oh my God, it's magic. Oh, it's right here. Good magic. Whew. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding some ramification. And what does he mean by ramification? I think we talked about that. So this branch maybe goes this way, and maybe this branch goes that way. And I like to jig. I don't like to, what do I want to say? Work in one area too much. So I'll be moving around. And I'm starting off with the red. You might say, why the heck is he doing that? Because if I don't like it, it's going to kind of disappear. Once I have these kind of set in, then I could get some of these darker if I want. And this branch kind of just ended, like in nature. Not everything is perfect. We'll call that a little stump. And maybe something comes out here. So see how I'm just moving around? If I hang around in an area too much, what happens is, instead of things looking irregular, they start looking the same. And we don't want that. This is nature. So I'll start working my way around, wending my way around. And up in here, I'm going to work this way. I want these a little bit lighter. So if I just do things like this, all of a sudden, I'm having fun. And I'm not worried about what branch goes to what tree or what, where it's from. And because it's just a mess of branches up here. I don't know, where did that picture go? Well, here it is. So if I'm looking at this, there's a whole mess. There's a whole mess of branches. You don't know what the heck, or where they're going, where they're coming from, or anything like that. So I have to be careful where I'm sticking my hand down. So I'm just kind of filling some of this stuff in and working my way around. Now I'm being a little frantic, which I'm usually not, but that's okay. We're going to be nice to ourselves. And I just keep going. So there's little pockets here and there. And now I'll turn it this way, because that filled in some. So this is looking a little too regular, so I have to break that up. And this is still damp. So I have to be careful because I don't want to be stamping. And this is really wet. with red, but I can start. Now, what I was saying was the reason why I'm starting off with red is because they start disappearing. So if they looked like a mistake, it's all we're doing is filling in and we're adding some texture. And what I'm doing is I'm adding branch texture, so it tricks the eye. So that's why I want to be quick and loose. And there's masking and everything here, so it's obscuring some of the stuff, thank goodness. And then we just keep going. We just keep moving forward, and I need more pigment. And so now I'm going to start getting a little darker. Now that some of this is formed, and I like stopping and starting and having these little dash marks and everything, because the oaks, they kind of grow contorted, and so I don't want perfect, gorgeous. Well, I want them gorgeous, but they don't need to be perfect. They don't have to connect either. And I just keep going. And down in here, this is where it's dark. So maybe I need to be a little bit more brave. Connect that better. Okay, he's going crazy. Rein it in here, mister. Oh, I'm talking to myself in the third person and it's just me. But see, I'm trying to be nice. And fill some stuff in. You don't have to keep belaboring some things. And I could just go on and on and on. I wish I had a little bit more masking dots in here. But I don't. That's a little thick. You didn't see that. And these are too vertical. Now see how I just go every which way? It kind of breaks everything up. And so now they're almost all the same color. So again, I am going to go with pink to break that up. It stops your eye from it looking all too darn regular. Some of these could be brighter. And then, because those are all kind of wet, what I like to do also is where there's intersections, I like to get it a little bit darker. So it looks like nature, naturally. Little sparkles. I don't know if these are still damp enough. So that helped break those, because it was starting to get too regular, but if you go quick enough, you can add some of that. So it's not all exactly the same, because that's not how nature is. Unless you're working on a Fibonacci thing, like a conch shell. Those are amazing. Okay, so I'm kind of happy with this. I kind of want to go over some things, what we're going to be doing in the workshop, and show you. Oh, I want to do a little bit more though. So some of this, I wanted to have some of that red showing because it's so fiery. So I'm being a little bit more dramatic because this is so fiery. And then what I want to do is I want to take some of the masking off, for crying out loud. It's time. But we have to make sure that this is completely dry before we take masking off. I have a student, or had a student, she passed away this last year, and she worked on the most beautiful rhododendron, and we were going to take the masking off, but hers wasn't completely dry, and what happened was it ripped, and it was the edge of a petal. And I don't know if you can see what, by me adding some of this red, is doing, but it's giving it this glow, which I'm really loving. I've been working here, 18 inches, sometimes in 12 inches away from it, so I haven't been able to have much distance. So I'll have to take a look at it at some point. But anyway, so there was nothing to be done. It was so sad. We couldn't glue it. It would have looked funny, if we tried to glue it on. And it was, tissue thin, that rip. So anyway. So my telling you that was because we have to wait for this to be completely dry before we remove the masking. So I'm gonna set this aside. I'm happy with it. I like the bigger ones much better though. And maybe, look I can't stop. I'm sorry people. I want some more darks in here. I like the red, but we need some darks. Break some of that up. Ooh, yeah, I like that better. And what's going to happen when we take the masking off also? Okay, so I'm just having a little bit of fun. I love the red perimeter edge, but I love having some of this dark in here. Oh, gotta be watching where you're sticking your arm. So, even though we had a bit of a rough start with the link, I've been enjoying myself and having a great time. I hope you have been too. And I'll stop. Gotta let this dry and then I can show a little bit more about what we're working on and give it a little bit more of an irregularity. There we go. Stop. Okay. Oh, I'm happy with that. It's kind of pretty. So when this is dry, we'll take the masking off. So I wanted to show, also, I've worked this background, the same thing, but in different ways. Okay, I'm gonna put this aside. So this is me when I was much, much younger and I had hair. So it was black and white, but I love the little dots, the little halos around me. So I painted myself, but I painted myself in color. Oh my God, look at, they're the same colors. And so using that same thing, I got the whole paper wet and worked. And this is on my website. So if you go to my Friday class, there's a link to this so you can see all the steps. And it was just what we did here. So I use those techniques that I just showed you for a lot of things. And working wet and wet, I work in a lot of places. So I'm going to put this aside so it doesn't get anything wet, give that a chance to dry. This is one of the images we'll be working on in the workshop, but we're only working on so much of it, so it's going to be cropped because there's no way we could do that. So it's cropped about there, it's cropped about here, and it's cropped about right there. But this is so pretty. So it's warm here and it's really cool there. We got all these little blossoms in there, and look at the colors. So I have given Susan in Dropbox all the line drawings, and this was what I was first going to do, but it was taking too long. There was too much. So I changed it, and this is like the second step. So the first step is putting the masking down. Then we're going to get this all wet, load yellow in, and load phthalo blue. So the phthalo blue and the yellow mixed together, and then we'll start breaking the shapes up. So you'll have a line drawing, and what I've done is this is an 11 by 17 piece of paper. So I've given her the JPEG, and I like them in JPEGs, so you can resize them. If they were sent as a PDF, that's kind of it. So this is, like I said, printed on 11 by 17 paper. This is also your homework before the workshop. So what I've indicated here, these are things that you're going to want to mask off. So I've got these masked off. There's a little line there, just little areas in here to keep it nice and neat, because if you look at this, there's some nice light areas in there. That's what makes it so dramatic. And I love how it's warm and cool, but at the same time there's all these luscious darks in here. So that's one of the images we'll be working on. And again, we're all working on a quarter sheet of watercolor paper. And so let me tell you just a little bit about this image. I went to Berkeley, and I was watching an artist, Gary Bukovnik, and he was at Berkeley's Botanical Gardens giving a workshop, and I was just so overwhelmed. So I had to step outside, and the sun was hitting the fence there, and there was these little succulents growing there. So I loved the way the light was hitting, and in the photograph there's little ants here and there, but everybody that was painting this with me did not want the ants in. I kind of wish I had the ants in. It's natural. Anyway, so that's one of the images. Another one of the images is this, and it's a yellowish rose with, some beautiful red edges with a honeybee in the middle. So we're not painting the whole thing, so we're not going to be putting that in there because we're cropping it down for size. But we will have homework for that. Oh, and this is paper that I stretched over stretcher bars, and then I varnished the paper. Okay, so we could talk about that too if you want. And so this is another image. Oh, I'm going to show you another. I'll be right back. So this was painted on 140 weight paper, because I had to get it soaking wet so that I could wrap it around the wooden stretcher bars. And this is not. So this is paper, 300-pound paper, and what I've done is I put it on the cradled birch wood. And so you put the decoupage goop down, you put your painting on top, you weight it, and you have to brayer it so there's no air pockets and all of that. And then you put a weight on it, and then when it's all dry, then you have to cut your paper. And then what I did was I used a spray varnish just to protect it, because it has a UV protectant. And then what I did was I used wax, and we could go over that, how we did that, and then you burnish it. So it's durable. It's also, the other one I showed was varnished with goldens, and it's It's a non-yellowing varnish and it has a UV protectant in it. And so that's why I sprayed this before I put the wax on. And one of the other reasons why I sprayed it was I signed my name in gold. It's hard to tell here. Let me show you something else. Oh, so here. So I signed my name in gold, and then I went over with the wax, and when I went over the wax, it smeared my name, so I had to wipe all the wax off as best I could, and then I varnished and took the gold off, but it's still a little cloudy there. It's a little golden cloud. And then what I did was I sprayed it with the varnish, let that dry, and then put the wax, and then signed my name. And then because I signed my name and then sprayed it so it was set, and then I was able to put the wax on and then burnish it. And this is really cute. This is on the cradled birch also. The other image we're going to be painting is this one. So this is a lot of wet on wet also. So it's putting the building up the road, and I actually have, but we're not working that big. So not to give away anything, but you start building the shape with a purple, then we get the whole thing wet and go over it with perm rose, and then we start working little shapes, working wet and wet, but within shapes, and working with a neutral tint and Winsor red. Now this doesn't have to be a red rose. It could be a yellow rose, it could be a white rose, it could be a lavender rose. It doesn't have to be a very bright red rose. And all of these, you could be using whatever colors you want. Okay, so I think my tree might be dry, but I'll show, but where the heck did I put it? Oh, here it is. No, I'm gonna hit this with the dryer, or no. So this was another image that I used with masking, and what I did was I did little dots, and then I used a ruling pen and I made little hash marks over them, like little asterisks, so it gives it a nice sparkle. And all the background was worked wet and wet, and the koi weren't, but working wet on wet and putting everything together. So I love this one. The original is in a monastery in Hawaii. Working wet on wet, I'm giving this a chance to dry. Working wet on wet, here's an example of working wet and wet. I wet the whole entire thing and splashed, you can see little splash marks of phthalo blue. It's stained, so it kind of hung in there. And I also used quinacridone gold, and then I tilted it and let it move about. Even through the statue and the pillar, this was all like that, because this is so much darker than this. So I didn't have to mask anything off, which was a joy. I have a love-hate relationship with masking. Working wet on wet, also, this is Princeton Harbor, and what I did was I worked wet and wet. So I worked the bottom half wet and wet, and I worked this top half here, the sky wet and wet. So I got this wet, loaded my phthalo blue, and put in Danthren and let it go back and forth so that the deeper color was up here. Down here, I worked wet and wet, but before I even put a wash of blue in here, I put these little stripes of a light indanthrene blue in here. So it was just all of these, I don't know if you could see these stripes. Once that was dry, I got this whole thing wet and again put phthalo blue and indanthrene and let it run down. And up here, I don't know if you can see where it's ghosty from here. Can you see? And then I filled in this later. So it was a little bit of a strip. And I love the water effect in here. It was so calm and it was in the morning. So this is the rock line. I don't know what you call it, but as a kid, we would go out here and we would go fishing. And you could see crabs and things like that. But anyway, so that's wet and wet. I love wet and wet. So I'm not just about flowers. And then this is gone. So this was from the same morning. This was looking towards, and I forget what the heck it was called. But I loved the other side, but this is looking west. So it was morning, so the sun was hitting, because the sun comes up from the east, don't you know, and it was hitting the building, and it had all these lovely reflections. And this was all decrepit, and I don't know what it was, a fishery, or where the fishermen went in, or a processing place, who knows, I don't know. And but I loved the view from the other side, because you saw the mountains, the harbor, and all of that. But and this is now gone. And so this was worked wet and wet also, just the same way as the other one was. Okay, so I think this is just about dry. So, oh, and talking about the line drawings. So, like I said, I made them as a JPEG so you can resize them. But what I will do is I will take the line drawing and I will have it so you can print 2 line drawings. One will be the left side or the top side, and one will be the bottom side. So you can tape them together if you're not able to print 11 by 17 paper like I am. This looks really cool. It's kind of Halloween-y though. I'm scared. Okay, so I'm just going to hit this with a dryer and I'll be right back. And I'll turn the volume down. Okay, I'm back. There were a couple of other tools that I love that are on the list. This is a Raphael Soft Aqua. Oh my God, my fingers are purple again. Soft Aqua Petit Gris Imitation Squirrel. So it's I think these are called a mop brush, but I love them. And this one is also wonderful. And this is an Isabi Martre Pure, which is pure sable. And this is a 14. Let's see, this is a 14 also. Look at what a fine point this one has, and this is a nice round. But what I love about these, I mean, you could get it to a point. It's hard to maneuver, but there's a nice point there. I don't know if you can see, but it's a lot different than that one. So you know how I was saying, as I was getting this wet and putting more color on, I didn't use a brush to get it wet. I used a water spritzer, because if I used a brush, it was going to leave streaks where I went across, and it was going to lift color. When we're working on some of the paintings, I want to make sure I have the softest brush possible, so as I'm getting something wet, it's not going to be lifting a lot of the color. And that's why I depend upon these brushes when I'm going to be doing that. Otherwise, I use these brushes all the time. With the masking information, this is my favorite tool. I just went to the hardware store, got a wooden dowel, cut it up into 6 or 8 inch lengths, and I just stick this in the dang pencil sharpener. You could get a kit, which is fine. It comes, the Incredible White Mask comes, and this is a 4.5 fluid ounce. It comes as a kit, like I got this from Jerry's Artorama. It comes with a kit with this nib, which is fine, and it also comes with the rubber cement pickup eraser. This is a virgin pickup eraser. I haven't had the guts to use it yet. Here's mine. Some of mine are even smaller, but this is, yeah, I love it. And then, like I said, with the using the masking, today I was just splattering, so I was able to lift, just dip and go like that, right? Dip it in, flick, dip it in, flick, and then close this up. But when I'm going to be masking a large area, I'll pour it into something like this so that I could dip in and apply it, instead of leaving this bottle open to air where I'm going to start getting a skin. Okay? And the other tool that I love to use, and I don't know if we're using this, I can't recall, but this is a ruling pen, and oh, I'll show you how I use it. Let's see if this is just too dry. It's kind of too dry, but it makes fine, fine lines, and you can see this over the purple. So if I think we're doing, for some reason, I've gone stupid, and I think I have that on the list, but I'm not sure. But anyway, I love a ruling pen. What's wonderful about this is that it's got 2 tines and a screw here, so you could either tighten it up or loosen it, and your tines move apart or they come closer together. And I love these. And I did talk about the other brushes, and now I think we can take the masking off. So we're Forrest Gumping it now, because you never know what you're gonna get. And sometimes what I do, oh look at, I smeared here. Thank goodness there was some masking there. And it obscures parts of the branches, it leaves a little bit of color. I want to be careful down here because that was so wet. And sometimes when it's like that, what I'll do, so I'm feeling with my finger where these little raised masked areas are. And I don't want to be too rough, because sometimes what happens is you start picking the color away too. Oh, and they're so cute. The ones that are soft, they're like little, oh, Soft edges, I love them. I'm a nut, I know. Ooh, God. This also is a workout. Hey, I did a huge oak tree and I had to take all the masking off because I used it for bark texture. And just by doing this, trying to get it off and make sure, my fingertips were, I didn't have any fingerprints. They were so soft, they hurt. Ooh. There we go. Any down in here. So remember, I took some of these off before I did that last one, so there's some pinks and some purples because I removed some of them. Otherwise, they would have been too obnoxious down here. And that's it. So now that this is done, oops, right in here. Just feeling around, little bits here and there. I like it. Now if I wanted to, I could go back in and create more of a glow if I wanted. Ooh. Okay, so do you see how this has purple, or it's kind of that mauvish color? All I have to do is hit the brush at the bottom of the container, wipe it off, and look at that, brush is nice and clean. Do you see any pink coming off? No, you don't. That's because this is a gorgeous, wonderful synthetic brush with a great tip, a super fine tip. So maybe in a couple of places I would just add a little bit more now that the masking is off. Here and there, create a little bit of a glow, halo. And I love, you don't see it from afar, but when you come up close, you kind of see it. And I like to get people's attention from a distance. But I like to, when they come up close, I want them to see these little tiny surprises. So you got to grab them from a distance, but you got to give them something to go, oh, when they come up close to see it. Hopefully that happens. I think I'm so clever sometimes. So anyway, but enough about me. What do you think of me? No, don't answer, don't answer. So it's giving it a little bit more of a glow. It's making it a little bit more dramatic. And I just drop some water. I could even get the tree darker. So I don't know if any of you guys have any questions about the materials or the workshop, which I think is going to be a heck of a lot of fun. And we'll have that YouTube thing worked out so much better. Like I said, every time, I was getting so used to, I just go in, say I'm going to go live, go to my streaming software, and just plug in the link that YouTube gives me, but everything was different. And I didn't know what to do. And I checked it. So I'm sorry about that. Especially some of you, I was getting texts. Are you on? People are waiting. People are waiting. Oh, what a little heart attack. And then sometimes you just want to get parts of things darker because maybe it's zigging and zagging. Do you see how I did that? Just got part of this dark, so it gives it the impression of movement. Instead of having to paint every single thing, and maybe these will stand out more. I love how, I don't know if you guys can see, how soft these are. Oh, I love them. And down in here, I think we could get some of this darker, because it's so dark in here, but actually I don't want your eye to keep going. And if some of these were too much, it's easy. So I'm going to hit this. This I just used with purple, right? And look at, nice and clean. So maybe I want to add a little bit of a pink to that, or maybe a little bit of a yellow. I ran out of room here. How about a dirty yellow? Because these are, maybe it's just a wee bit too much. Easy just to dot over parts so that they're not all so overwhelming. And see how I'm just lightly going here and there. Not having to be perfect, just toning a couple of things down here and there. And I'm going to say, no, I'm not. There's something I'm not liking here. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just get it nice and deep there, and then we'll just soften this out. There. I like that better. Love it. All right, so this is it. I've done. Sorry for all the, mishaps to get this thing started, but I had fun, even though it was just me, myself here, but I had Susan and Vicky and then my mom and other people texting, what's going on? Where are you? It says waiting for you, and I thought I was on. So anyway, let me do this. I had a ball painting, and I hope you learned some things, and I hope you're going to sign up for the workshop and have fun with me, because it would be great. So if you have any questions, shoot them off to me or to Susan, and I'll be sure to answer them. So thanks a lot, and thanks Susan, and thanks Vicky, and I'll talk to you all later. Thanks.